Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something that has been a little bit forgotten. Ari and I, our guest, were talking about this before we started recording that when this cycle started, we were all talking about it. And we're still in this cycle, but we're not talking about it as much. So Ari said, let's bring it back. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the significance, the meaning, the energetic profile of what we're navigating when it comes to Mars and Pluto, and a dance that they began in about September of 2024 that we will be completing mid to late April of this year. And so the energetics of this are still very much in play, especially with the Mercury and Venus retrograde that we're in right now. And these energies will continue to be in play until the end of April. So let's talk about it. What does it mean? How do we work with these energies? We have with us here Ari Moshe Wolfe, who has been featured on this platform many times. He has been practicing professionally for over 15 years. He's an evolutionary astrologer, so he really brings in the journey of the soul and what the astrological chart and what the transits can, how they speak to this journey of the soul. And so, Ari, I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for being back on the show.
Great to be here.
All right. And then Ari was also just featured in our panel event that we just did a few days ago called Navigating Change. This was featuring Natasha Alter, Gemini Brett, Kaylin Castell, Nora Rochelle, and Ari. And we had an amazing discussion about how to take the overarching astrological signatures of this time, how to take the invitations and apply them in our lives so that we can navigate this with as much grace as possible. We can be as much on our path aligned with our soul's journey as possible. It was a very dynamic and alive conversation. And if you didn't tune in for that, you still can. Just go to astrologyhub.com/change. The recording is available. It's a donation-based give as you wish event. So it is yours to access for whatever you would like to put towards it. All right. Ari, let's talk about this. Mars-Pluto.
Okay. So let's just go over some of the logistics of this. Mars entered Cancer in September, moved into its first of 3 oppositions with Pluto in early November. Then it entered into Leo, moved retrograde, and it's opposed Pluto for its second time in the Leo-Aquarius axis. Then Mars went back into Cancer, and just 2 weeks ago in February, Mars stationed direct at 17 degrees Cancer. It's slowly moving through Cancer, and it's going to take until sometime in April until Mars finally reaches Leo. And the final opposition between Mars and Pluto will be at the end of April. So we can say roughly September, October until April, which really it's, half a year or more than that. We've been in this Mars-Pluto phase. So what we're going to speak about is both really just kind of reconnecting and grounding. What is the underlying evolutionary intent? What's the meaning? How do we understand in general the relationship between Mars and Pluto? And this is a very helpful thing to learn both in tracking transits and also just understanding that in our own natal chart. Like, where's Mars in your chart? Where's Pluto? A very helpful way of thinking. So we'll establish that. And then we'll tune into what is the unique dynamic between this particular Mars-Pluto relationship and what does it mean for this cycle to be coming to a close right now, moving from Cancer into the Leo-Aquarius axis. So let's start perhaps with just defining the general meaning of the Mars-Pluto relationship.
Yes.
Okay, great. So both Mars and Pluto correspond to desire. When we speak about Pluto, we're looking at the energy and the archetype of desire, but not on the level of, I desire to drink this water. We're looking at desire on a soul level, which we can say is the underlying reason for why we create human experience in the first place. What are the desires within our own soul that impels us to have the human experience? In other words, what are we trying to work out? So from this point of view, and this is sort of like the philosophical ground of the Jeffrey Wolfe Green evolutionary astrology lineage that I practice and teach, it looks at each life from the perspective, from the lens of this entirety human experience is sort of a vehicle for us as a soul to have the experiences that we're wanting to have. So we have experience, we kind of marry experience, like we come into the fullness of human experience and relationships of all kind to grow, to learn something, because there's something that we're wanting to know. We're wanting to experience something more within ourselves. So we fulfill these desires. And it could be, whatever desires we have, desires for being liked, being loved, being popular, being famous, being important, right? And we create all kinds of experiences to play out whatever it is we're wanting to play out. And we exhaust it and we move on. This level of desire says underneath all of the experiences of our life, we kind of ask ourselves the fundamental question, what is it I'm wanting to learn? At the core of all of these experiences, what's my soul program? What are the desires that I'm working out? So that's Pluto. You can then understand desire on the level of Mars as a more conscious, thoughtful, executive expression of desire. I want this water. Mars corresponds to how, as a soul in this human experience, we're engaging in this leadership by way of consciously choosing what we are doing with our energy. I want this. I don't want this. I'm feeling this. How am I going to respond to it? So there's a very visceral, responsive quality to Mars. Now, on the most gross level, Mars isn't very conscious, meaning we're just going to have a sort of reactive, orientation to life. As we become more and more self-aware, we look at our reactions or our lack of reactions, and we're able to reflect upon, okay, is how I'm responding getting me to where I want to go? And this is essentially the way that Mars points back to Pluto. In other words, relative to our underlying soul program, which is not conscious, right? For the most part, we're not conscious of the deeper soul content that we're working out. Like no one's like walking through this life thinking, I'm going to put on this suit and get this job because I'm playing out this desire to experience what it's like to feel successful. Like I need to experience success, right? I've had 5 lifetimes as a monk, and there's a dimension of being that I need to play out. And that's what everything is. Like everything is just like, we got to play out experience so that we can exhaust it. Jeff Green describes the evolutionary journey of the soul as the gradual exhaustion of all desire until the only desire remaining is the desire to reunite with the source. So this desire to essentially know who we always are, like we can all kind of access on some level this desire to just know the truth, but then we have, but I also like want that new relationship, right? Like, so we're on this journey exploring and playing out whatever it is that needs to be fulfilled and worked out within us. So then the question becomes, are the choices and responses that we're offering serving our own evolutionary growth? And that's where we cultivate greater thoughtfulness and consciousness relative to Mars. And you can just think of it as you're having a conversation with someone and they trigger your button. They say just that thing that, relative to whatever kind of Mars archetype, Mars and Libra, are we going to be passive and agreeable? We might. And that passive and agreeability will kind of set the stage for a certain kind of experience within relationship. But then that path that we are creating for ourselves may or may not lead to the soul empowerment and the underlying experiences that we actually came here for. So Mars then is a refinement process where we cultivate more thoughtfulness and agency in our choices and how we choose to respond to the impulses arising within. I notice this impulse to fight, or fawn, but how do I want to work with this energy? And what's interesting about Mars, you have to do something with that energy. Like Mars is energy. And so we're going to be triggered and we're going to feel elicited in some way. And you can't just be like, oh, that's interesting. The very energy of Mars points to there's something that we need to play out in this life. And the question always becomes not a matter of act or don't act, but more so, how are we going to act? How are we going to respond? How are we going to work with that? The actions can be internal, meaning we can be transmuting it, but there's always an engaged, intentional meeting of that energy. So we can think of Mars as how we're constantly evolving and refining our choices, behaviors, actions, responses as we grow in self-awareness of what we're truly trying to achieve in this evolutionary journey in this life. So you can think of Mars as how we execute conscious choices relative to the underlying soul program relative to Pluto. So we can, everyone watching can kind of pause there, think about this in your own chart. And it doesn't matter if there's an aspect, doesn't matter what the actual geometric relationship is. Just consider the archetype sign house of your Mars, the archetype of your Pluto sign house. Connect with the energy of that Pluto. Like what's the soul program? And just to add a little more dimension before we move on from this, when we speak to the soul program, it's not just like, okay, I want these experiences. We're looking at the whole archetype of attachment. Whatever we desire is what we're going to be most invested in. So if I'm wanting to have an experience, I'm going to be most psychologically and emotionally invested in the outcome of that experience. If I'm really wanting this person to feel a certain way about me, if I'm wanting to succeed in this, we become attached, right? And this is where in the Pluto journey, it's a very intimate, again, it's like full on, we're married to it. We're married to life. We're married to this incarnation. It's a full on experience where we're going to experience our deep concern with how we might lose that underlying sense of security, betrayal, loss. I'm going to not get what I want. I'm going to lose what I have. And so there can be this evolutionary threshold with our Pluto of feeling, oh, I got the person, place, thing, object focus that I've been wanting. And so we're having this new experience that is empowering just as much as I'm feeling disempowered relative to where I can't get what I want. And all of that's pointing us back to our soul program. So the deeper psychological content of your Pluto, think about that, connect with the energetics of that, and then look at our Mars and contemplate, how are we making choices consciously in our life to meet and sort of move us forward along the evolutionary path? Sometimes it means having the power and the courage to determine ourselves to move beyond dynamics of entanglement, entrapment, or being blocked or stifled or limited in our capacity to make choices, to say, I have the power and the resilience to change my dynamics, to move, to say no, to let go, to weed out, to move on, to empower. And sometimes it's literally the opposite. Sometimes it's you've been trying to hold on to this power, to this control, and it's not going to serve you anymore. And so then that Mars becomes, where do I direct all of this energy? We can feel victimized. We can feel angry. We can feel resentful. And sometimes there's an evolutionary push relative to that Mars-Pluto relationship where we need to actually go back within and become psychologically aware enough such that we can choose to direct our energy elsewhere relative to where it's just not working for us anymore. So we can pause there. That's something that I would invite all of us to contemplate just relative to your own Mars-Pluto.
Okay, Ari. So that's a great setup for the Mars and Pluto relationship in general, like how Mars and Pluto dance together and what they're eliciting within us. Everyone can look at their charts and apply what you just said to their own Mars and Pluto placements for a very individual understanding. And we are all riding a collective wave right now with this Mars-Pluto dance. So let's talk about the specifics of this exact Mars-Pluto, the Mars-Pluto opposition that we're about to have, and also Mars in these final moments of Cancer, and all the different things that this could be eliciting for us collectively and how to work with it.
It occurs to me to share one more piece on this, and this is actually a really helpful way to kind of get into the Mars-Pluto relationship, and then we'll launch into the specific configuration. Pluto corresponds to perception because perception comes from desire. Like whatever we're desiring on a soul level, the deeper psychological dimension of our being is going to determine what we're seeing. Like we walk into a room, we all have our own soul program, so we're all going to be triggered or emotionally invested in different things. So we're going to perceive the reality around us in different ways. Like if I'm dealing with a deeper insecurity relative to unresolved desires around how I'm seen, of course, I'm going to internalize and perceive Pluto, what people are doing or how that person is getting the dances and is liked and they're having that conversation or how are they looking at me. So his perception really points back down to the underlying psychology of the perceiver. It's a very important Pluto principle. Of course, like perception can also correspond to on a more superficial level, like data collection, like Mercury. But here we're dealing with sort of the deeper psychological root, the ground of what we actually think we're seeing. That's Pluto. What we perceive will determine, thus, what we think is out there, what will determine the possible choices that we believe exist relative to the experiences we think we're having. And that's where Mars comes in. We're going to choose our actions, Mars, relative to that which we think we're responding to, Pluto. And so if we're in a state of insecurity or feeling threatened on a deeper psychological level, we may not even know why we're feeling threatened. We'll just be aware of how we feel, that visceral, strong Plutonian craving and aversion or strong reaction to something. Mars will translate that and choose, it'll make choices relative to what we think is happening. So let's give that framework and apply it to this current Mars-Pluto relationship. First, when we're dealing with an opposition between Mars and Pluto in any sign, it's innately very stressful. It's one of the most triggering and catalyzing aspects you can really have out there, because it can highlight that sense of feeling threatened. It can highlight that sense of polarity. There's a world out there, and there's something going on that is threatening my underlying sense of security, and I need to act. I need to do something to establish and maintain that security. Let's just think about this archetypally. We have Mars in Cancer right now. It's moving into opposition to Pluto in Aquarius. So let's just think about this archetypally in the relationship between Aquarius and Leo. And then it will bring in the specifics of Mars. So Aquarius corresponds to the group, right? Like on the most basic level, it's like a group of people. And on an evolutionary level, corresponds to the collective and personal evolution of humanity. So where we're liberating from the known. And thus we're always going to have groups of people, also elements within our own being, that won't fit into the existing status quo that's been established. So in society, everywhere in the world, there's always going to be a Saturn structured, crystallized norm. And then relative to that, there's always going to be this individuating quality, Aquarius, that is not conditioned or wants to decondition from those norms. Because any universalized norm isn't going to actually acknowledge the full scope of our individuality. And same thing with us on an individual level. We might fit into certain boxes in our religion, church, group, social structures, but there's always going to be an element within us that is not that can't be defined by that is fundamentally free from any framework, any template, any structure of conditioning. And that's Aquarius. And that element that is free, that's individuating from the known, doesn't have any known parameters to it. I mean, it's just not conditioned. So Aquarius is our unconditioned nature, but it's always going to express as where groups of people at different levels of consciousness are trying to establish their own sense of identity relative to the consensus. So at any moment in time, you can say Pluto in Aquarius is going to correspond to groups of people that are trying to establish their sense of identity. And we see that, all over the place. I don't really fit into a Republican or a Democrat, or, I feel that who I am doesn't really fit into this mainstream notion or this construct or this religious framework. And so there's a lot of people trying to find their group or their belonging, but then there are a lot of people that really can't quite figure out where their group or their belonging is. So just hold that as like group dynamics. When you think of that relative to Pluto, there can be the fear and the insecurity of not belonging. I need to belong. I'm attached to being a part of the group. So relative to our attachments, we can, really penetrate and get to the core of, I want to osmose and kind of get to the center of this particular way of being, this group, this kind of aspect of society, because that symbolizes for me belonging and inclusivity. And I really want to have that belonging and that inclusivity. So I was alienated by this group, but this group is open to me. So I'm going to join this group. And now suddenly I'm identified with this and I'm not that. And then at a certain point, this becomes sort of alienating, or we become sort of elitist in holding on to that identity, and then we alienate others. Like, it's an ongoing process, okay? Fundamentally, at the core, Pluto in Aquarius says there's always going to be this impulse of liberation where we're never going to fit in perfectly and entirely into any kind of framework, into any kind of construct. And so we might have friends that resonate with us. We might have a lot of enemies that are like, I can't talk to you anymore because of your beliefs, right? But it's like we're always going to find ourselves on either side of that coin. Then it's about allowing ourselves to simply be as we are, and to allow like the greater ecosystem of life to be as it is without fixing these closed you and me and us and them. So that's like, in short, the evolutionary journey of Pluto and Aquarius. Let's contemplate that relative to the opposition with Leo and Mars and Leo. Mars and Leo, as we haven't gotten there yet, is this creative actualization. I have an individual sense of destiny. There's a need for entitlement and confidence relative to Mars and Leo, to feel entitled to create and actualize one's unique sense of purpose and direction in life. And I can't be impeded. You can't tell me who I'm supposed to be or hold me back from my destiny. And so, of course, that can be arrogance, but also on the other side of that, there can be a lack of confidence, right? Can I be courageous enough to really stand out there and be seen? Do I really believe in myself? So that Mars and Leo really needs that confidence and that courage without being conceited, but that confidence is important. So now, think about just, and I invite everyone again, maybe you can pause for a moment, just feel into, like, what is it like to have that polarity? And connect as well with the way that Mars acts relative to Pluto. We can feel really triggered because this group of people is taking away my freedom and right to self-actualize. This can then become the point where our deepest fears and insecurities of a Pluto, that Pluto insecurity in Aquarius is, I'm not going to belong, or my individuality is being suppressed. I can't be who I am. I have to fit into something that I'm not. I have to conform. I have to suppress my own nature. So that deep fear or the trauma and the subconscious memory of being suppressed, being oppressed, being told you can't be who you are. You can't be gay. You can't be the skin color. You can't be this religion. You can't be all the various examples that exist right now. So that fear then is translated through that Mars entitlement. I'm being threatened. My freedom is being suppressed, and I'm going to project this group or this cause as thus what I need to push up against in order to establish my own freedom. So on one level, that Mars in Leo can become a sense of entitlement to act as if there are enemies, and to be in a very strong sense of opposition to where we perceive the threat of other out there. So it can heighten a sense of entitlement to do whatever we believe is necessary to regain our freedom. And again, relative to the Pluto, we can have, I'm a freedom fighter fighting for this greater collective cause, or I'm looking toward just one enthusiastic person that's going to stand for the freedom that me and my people. And what's so interesting about Aquarius, every group and every subdivision of every group fractally expanded, ultimately from the principle of all of us belonging, every part, every being wants to be seen because we're all included. When we go so far into saying, you're not okay, you're bad, you're wrong, there's always going to be something that's created where the parts of ourselves that are being rejected will then feel like I don't belong. And we see that it's so fascinating, right? Because we see groups of people from all different subdivisions of society and life that feel underrepresented, that feel like they're not being seen, they're not receiving what they need. Then it's like you can have the very opposite group that thinks the exact same thing. I wrote this article. I want everyone to read it on, I'm Jewish and I actually lived in the West Bank for a long time, on that the main piece of healing with Israelis and Palestinians that I'm just so drawn by is where I'm seeing Israelis and Palestinians who have lost children, whose family members have been killed, talking to each other. because it's so easy to get stuck. And I know this, like we just see this all the time. It's so easy to get stuck in me and my people. And I'm going to fight for our right to exist, but to the neglect of them and their people, because they're the problem. And then you find that, and it's so easy to kind of make another the it. Like Martin Buber is someone I love, and he was actually an early Zionist, but he was very clear about, if we're going to do this, we have to be in right relationship to the Arab people that live there. Otherwise, we're going to make them an it and disregard their humanity, and that's not going to work out for us. Mm. But we had other Zionists, like the early founders of Israel, that said, once the Jews have a state, anti-Semitism will be gone. We know that didn't work. Whenever we seek to entitle our own existence and our own deserving, our own right, without acknowledging and respecting the equal deserving of others, we create war and imbalance. So that's a big part of this Mars-Pluto dynamic when we're just exploring. So can everyone feel how that polarity, it's like me and them, me versus them, or us versus them, and our entitlement and need to actualize, how easy it is to feel threatened. And I'll just say one more thing relative to this, and then I'll pause. The other side of that would be this deep stress of feeling profoundly disempowered. My freedom, my rights, my creative potential is being blocked and limited because of powers outside of my control. This political group, this party, this nation, this country, these people have all the power and control over me. And so I don't have any enthusiasm left. Zero. I have no will, no energy left. What's the point of my actions? What can I do? And that can become a very profound defeatist mentality. And that's like the disempowered Mars-Pluto dynamic. And that can easily lead to a total loss of our own free will and agency, because we can very easily prove to ourselves, there's nothing we can do anyway. We're stuck. Or it can lead to, because I'm completely disempowered, I'm going to entitle myself to be completely violent and do whatever I think is necessary because I can't be free anyway. So those are some dimensions. So let me pause there.
So Ari, can we get access to the article that you wrote, and could we put that link in the show notes?
So this is an article with my own little introduction, some stories, and it's showcasing a cocktail of various videos and articles that all focus on Israelis and Palestinians interacting with each other and choosing to reach out and make connection. Absolutely, I'll share that with you.
Amazing. How inspiring. And it's not the kind of thing you hear on the news.
Exactly. I'm honestly, it's what's most alive in my soul right now. It's what I care most, and I want this so badly to be shared. So I'm really grateful to share it with you.
So just these stories of people seeking peace, that these stories that even though they've been hurt, even though they've lost children, even though they've suffered the great horrors.
Two fathers, one lost a daughter, one lost a son, talking to each other. And at that moment where the temptation for hatred, and I know people that have lost children that are in that hatred, and I'm not going to argue with them, but I want more of this to be available so that it's more in the field, so that where there is that, like, I want to hate and distrust and close off, there's a little bit of an invitation of like, oh, there are these two people that actually are choosing to talk to each other. And I share some of my own time there. I actually lived on an illegal settlement for a time back in 2003. And I share a story of meeting an Arab who I later learned was actually a well-known peace activist. He picked me up while I was hitchhiking, and he opened my heart, and just the experience of reaching across to the other, and so healing where the other is no longer an it, but another, a thou, me and you.
Wow. So good, Ari. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for following that passion in you, that desire in you to share these stories. Who knows who and what it will inspire.
Yeah, thank you.
Ari's going to send us the link to that, and we'll go ahead and put that in the show notes as well for all of you. So what do we do if we find ourselves in that place of disempowerment, hopelessness, like even feeling aggressive or violent because of what is the evolutionary impulse or way out of that shadowy element?
Let's address that, and then we'll backtrack to really understand how Mars and Cancer is leading up towards this. Yeah, everything I've expressed really is a shadow, highlighting the tension between the Mars-Pluto opposition. Right. Let's come back to the idea that relative to what we perceive is happening will determine the choices that we believe are possible to choose relative to what's going on. So if we're perceiving ourselves to, in fact, be threatened, limited, stuck, blocked, that's going to create a very specific, narrow avenue of possible responses.
Yes.
And so it fundamentally points back down to, and this is the crux of our soul evolution, our own agency to cooperate or resist with our own evolutionary program. Because we take responsibility for what we perceive. Now, this is not something we throw on each other to alienate, because we're all on our own journey and not one of us perceives anything objectively. So we're all going to make the choices that we make, and that's fundamentally true. But then the individual question that only each one of us individually can work out is, are these choices that I'm offering, are these actions that I'm offering working for me relative to where I really want to go in life? Am I becoming the person that I want to become? That's the threshold where we meet the gate of this profound Mars-Pluto evolutionary transition. And the way that I would translate this for us all, what are the ways with Mars and Leo that we are called upon to actualize greater courage and trust in our own leadership to affirm the fact of our freedom? I had a dream where I was told in its highest, actually I said these words in a dream and I wrote them down thinking these were like the best words I've ever heard. I feel like they were given to me to like remember and know. The highest interpretation of every experience is to see it as affirming and respecting the fact of your freedom. Every experience in its highest interpretation serves to respect and affirm the fact of your freedom. And that's a powerful piece to work out, because it takes us directly to the core of where we don't see ourselves as free. And the entrapment of Pluto and Aquarius is, I can't be myself. It's like, to give a most simple example, we're in a, Thursday night political meeting with your local political group, and you're starting to have different feelings. But if you express them, people won't agree with you. If you share your thoughts on Facebook, you'll get a lot of negative feedback. And how scary it could be in the context of our loved ones, our friends, our family, to just be who we are. So the answer is a courage to recognize our freedom is not because we're pushing through an obstacle overtly in the physical world. Our freedom is found in our concentration and abiding in the truth of who we are, that we are safe, that we are secure. And again, this is a thing for each one of us to work out on our own, and we're going to choose the actions that we need to, that are accessible for us. To be who we are and to walk the path that we're here to walk. We all have our dharma. We all have our path in life. People might like it, people might not like it. People might throw tomatoes or flowers. But the moment we become reactive, or we shy away, or we become defensive, or fight against, or alienate ourselves, or cancel others, is the moment we actually lose touch with the fact of our power and our freedom. So I think the general message that I would offer is for everyone, there's this growing movement towards cultivating and grounding this greater courage. We're here to birth something that only we can birth. This might put us into dissonance with other people temporarily. It might put us into resonance with other people, and it's okay. Like, the biggest teaching here is don't react to it all. Not everything needs to be a big deal. Not everything needs to be a reaction. Sometimes friends come and go. Sometimes we just don't resonate in the same ways. The question is, can we just allow everything and everyone to be where it is, but follow our path with courage? So that to me would be the teaching. Now, many of us are going to be called into unique forms of activism, of action, and that's all true. It's all that. I mean, there's no judgment with Mars. We have to act and do what we need to do and play it out all the way. And then come back to the game board, What's next? And did that work? Do I want to keep on doing that? Or is there another path for me? We all got to play it out completely so that we're just exhausting that energy.
Okay, so let me see if I understand, Ari. Essentially, we have these soul level desires. And Pluto points to a lot of that for us. Mars is the way we actually take action towards those desires. With Mars and Pluto in opposition, we may be faced with the shadowy elements within ourselves that are blocking us from taking, well, we're perceiving them to be blocking us from taking the actions we need to take to birth the thing that we're here to birth and to live the life and give the gifts that we're here to give. So in this period of time between September of 2024 and April of 2026, we're seeing a lot of those shadowy elements that are kind of like obstacles standing in our way. And so by being aware of what those things might be for each one of us as individuals, is it the fear of being ostracized by the group? Is it the fear that a lack of confidence that you can even do the thing you came here to do? It's finding the courage to see that we are blocking ourselves, that the freedom to choose the path to live the life is already here, and that as long as we're stuck in those shadowy perceptions, we won't see the actions.
That's right. They don't exist.
We won't see the options for the actions that we're meant to take. So it's in recognizing the shadow and recognizing where we're stuck in our perception and doing the work we need to do to release those things so that we can see the various options that are here,
right.
but only available when we see that they exist, or when we
the entire world that exists is like desire yields a total paradigm of reality that on a different level, completely other choices exist, and they're incomprehensible at that level.
Right.
A great example of this is there's this man named Rami, I forgot his last name, from Gaza, a Palestinian man. He joined several years ago in this Zoom meeting with 200 people, Israelis and Palestinians, all about peace. And someone outed him to Hamas. And Hamas said, well, you are defeating our purpose. And so they took him, and he hasn't been seen since.
Oh.
But we can't control the outcome. Pluto, you might be killed. I mean, there might be very hard consequences. And so a lot of us are afraid of the consequences. I'm going to be excommunicated. They won't want to talk to me anymore. I mean, there can be very real fears. And so that really becomes that crux of choosing our freedom means sometimes necessarily going through these evolutionary periods where there might be consequence, but if we stay true to our essence, that's purifying. But that's why I love all these videos that I compiled, because imagine how easy it is to become angry and to hate the other when you just lost a loved one. But to choose instead to recognize there are other people on the other side who also lost loved ones. Mm-hmm. I'm angry, and in all of these videos, each person expressed that it was their experience of loss that impelled them into the peace work. Because that experience of loss showed them that if they kept on fighting and took revenge, it would go on and on and on and on and on. So that's the way that we transmute that energy. We take the pride and we move it towards respect and acknowledgement.
Okay, so what you're saying is that sometimes we have these fears, and they can be actually rooted in reality in the third dimension, meaning like you said, that man that showed up at the peace things, and that was against like the tribal mind that he was a part of. And so he had to pay
political rule. Yeah.
Right. So he had to pay the consequence, which we don't really know what it is, but you're saying from a soul's perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, that probably was the right choice for him.
I would guess, and I wouldn't want to know. Right? I wish I can talk to him.
Right.
But I would wonder if there's a deeper peace, and I would hope and pray that there's a deeper peace in his heart, because what he's done is, first of all, so important. I found out about him because I've heard from many, many Jews. I don't know if there's anyone in Gaza that wants peace, because there's so much indoctrination from Hamas. I mean, huge indoctrination to hate Israelis, to hate Jews. And I'm like, I know that there is. I just Googled Gaza peacemakers, and I found a lot of people. But reading his story, and then for me to have the opportunity to share his story, is so healing and so what the world needs right now.
I always think of people like Martin Luther King and Jesus Christ, and so many people who did exactly what you're saying. Like, they had the courage to live their path and to live their truth and to speak it unapologetically, they did pay consequences in the third dimension for that.
Sometimes that's what happened.
However, their impact and legacy, and I mean, you could argue good or bad, I understand, but like they left, and their lives impacted so many lives because they were demonstrating that. They were demonstrating that living in truth. And I would venture to say it's one of the scariest freaking thing ever for us, right? Like it's terrifying. It goes to that base survival, life or death kind of level.
And that's right there, the essence. You just brought forward the essence of a Mars-Pluto opposition. Because I need to act, and it's like, think of an opposition as you're facing your deepest fear here. Like my empowerment to act is bringing me into direct relationship to where I'm most afraid, where I risk the greatest loss. And yet actually that's where the greatest evolution, loss for a caterpillar is not loss for a butterfly. So it's we have to be willing to almost like die to ourselves. And it doesn't mean everyone, we can also be deluded. We can be like, yeah, I'm going to fight for this noble cause and be completely in this place of hatred and anger, and even be willing to kill ourselves. Again, that could be a shadow expression of that Mars Leo. I think for most of us, though, it's more subtle. It might feel scary. It might even feel like death, but there's probably not going to be a threat of death for most of us.
Right.
But it might feel that way because it says, what are the ways in which we've been keeping it small? So can I offer a little perspective on just the Cancer transition into Leo?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Because this is a building of self-security. There's been, it's sort of like this whole journey has been sort of, the mother has been Cancer. It's like, it's been grounded in this Cancer phase with a little bit of Leo, but we've never really left the Cancer ecosystem. Mars in Cancer is basically looking out. Am I safe here? Am I protected? Do I have to fight against it? Is a bear going to come and eat my family? Like there's a very primal protective quality to Mars in Cancer. And so we can feel very threatened. Do you like me? Do I belong? Are you trying to hurt me? So there can be this impulse on one level to a lot of anger and defensiveness relative to, I don't like how I'm feeling. I feel insecure relative to what you're doing or what's happening out there. And so I'm going to react in a very immature way. That's one dimension. Or I feel insecure and I'm very vulnerable and afraid of being hurt. So I'm going to go hide in my little shell and protect myself from all the scary things that are happening in the world. And just consider, to understand, Cancer is your sense of identity, whereas Capricorn is your nation or your country. And then by extension, Capricorn to Aquarius is like your nation, your country, and also like your groups, your social environment, your people. And then Cancer might be how you are identified by that. The ways in which you are identified as an American, right? As a Russian, as an Israeli, as a Palestinian, as a Jew, as a Democrat. Like we form, and then that becomes, I'm safe here with Cancer. Okay, these people are familiar. The smell, the feel of it is what's known to me. And then other, Aquarius, well, that's scary. I don't know if they're going to hurt me. I don't know if I can trust them. So it can be very easy to live in this sort of narrow, almost childlike two-dimensional world where we're afraid and either we're in a protective, defensive place or hiding. The point with this Cancer journey is to begin to get to know ourselves in a much deeper way. What is the basis for my own essential security? How do I tend to and nurture this developmental journey of my own soul? What's emphasized right now as Mars is one, picking up speed, getting closer to Pluto, and also ruling all of this eclipse, Aries, Mercury, Venus energy. My sense of feeling threatened, my sense of insecurity, my sense of there being something scary out there is just pointing back to where I am stronger and more secure than I have yet realized. I haven't yet stepped into the strength and the safety. It's like a child that hasn't ever left home and is going to, nursery for the first time. It's scary. They are safe, but they don't feel safe yet. It's like for all of us, we are stronger than we know. And so we might feel a lot of very strong emotional reactions. And I'm not wanting to be belittling, but it's helpful to just kind of remind ourselves it's very subjective. It's not necessarily true. I actually had a dream. I was really afraid of something happening and had a dream where I sang one of my songs. The lyrics are, "Your fears aren't real. They're just feels. Keep it real. You are safe, you are pure, and this moment is the cure to the dream of separation." Your fears aren't real, they're just feels. Keep it real. You're safe, you are pure, and this moment is the cure. So it's like to remind yourself, I'm safe, I'm secure. What's my purpose? What's my path? What's my purpose? What do I, right? Like, but we need to nurture that journey. So I think it's right now, throughout March and April, heightened insecurity, potential sense of feeling threatened, feeling on guard, maybe like I'm not safe, but that's kind of like the very pivot where we are to learn the fact and the truth of being safer and stronger than we know. That's how I would phrase this moving from Cancer into Leo.
Okay. So on top of fears in terms of going towards our desires and living our soul's path, there is the potential for a sense of not being safe, not being secure, either wanting to withdraw or somehow protect by maybe lashing or, and that coming back to what is my purpose, what is my path, and asserting like I am safe, I am secure. What is my purpose? What is my path? That can help us avoid some of the pitfalls of this amplification time that we're going to be in, where these things could be even more heightened. The sense of insecurity, the sense of lack of safety, that could be more heightened as Mars is in the final degrees of Cancer. And as we're going to this final opposition. So I think personally, just the awareness that there is a tendency towards this could be all you need to be like, okay, I'm kind of like falling into that. Exactly. I don't need to do that. This is a passing cloud. This is not forever. That's it. So how do I come back to myself and not exhaust myself and totally dissipate my energy and get pulled way off my path by just being aware that there's a tendency toward these things right now?
Exactly. To have that self-reflection. And again, it comes back down to many of us, and many times we won't have the ability to stop that momentum of fear. Yeah. And we're going to see this, of course, in the world, right? That the momentum of having a strong perception and thus being impelled into reactivity relative to that perception. Sometimes it's like, you can't stop that momentum once it started. Then maybe we can come back afterwards and assess. But I think it comes back down to taking responsibility to the extent that we can / want to, or know that we could, for what we're perceiving. And come back to, what world do I want to live in from the inside out, not from the outside in? And that's a powerful ground of practice. The deeper we go in it, the more profound it becomes. And it's like the agency and free will of Mars-Pluto is, we have free will, but we need to remind ourselves that we do. And we can only remind ourselves that if we really want to know that. And I don't know who's the one that wants to know it. That's like the mystery of like the soul. It's like, if we want it, we will remind ourselves of it. But that wanting has to come from some place deep inside of us.
Right. Okay, you've given us some really great questions we can ask throughout this time. So I want to just summarize a few of them that I starred on my little notes here. One of them is, am I becoming the person that I want to become? So are the actions that I'm taking, is the perception that I have, is that bringing me closer to the person that I want to be? That was one of them. Another one is you recommended that we allow everyone and everything to be what it is.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a huge one.
That's a huge one. Allow everyone and everything to be what it is. Well, you can only do that if you don't have the sense that everything and everyone being what they are is a threat to you.
Exactly.
Right? As long as we feel threatened by everyone and everything as it is, it's really hard to be in allowing.
Completely.
Yeah. So that comes back to that sense of security and safety, and where is that sourced ultimately, right? And then the last one that I started was one you just said, which was taking responsibility for what you're perceiving. So maybe even just taking stock of like, what is my perception of the world right now? What am I noticing? What am I getting snagged by? What is, you know, taking my awareness? Where is my perception? And then flipping that to, okay, this is what I see, but what is the world that I want to live in? And from the inside out, not trying to like make that happen from the outside in, from the inside out. So, I mean, just those three things alone, oh my God, that could be like contemplation for a lifetime, but is really helpful just to sort of anchor in some of those ideas as we're living our lives and going through this very, I mean, tumultuous time on the planet, really.
Yeah, indeed. I'll just add some more flesh to that. Because perception really seems real, we can't ever fake this stuff. Like we cannot for the life, right? We can't ever pretend to see something that we don't see. So this is never a matter of trying to make something real that isn't real for us. So we're going to see what we see, and we just see this all over the world right now. Where there's a strong feeling of feeling threatened or feeling insecure, we're going to feel like that is our reality. And I think the hard but the beautiful point of evolution is where we just kind of allow ourselves to be there for a time and to recognize, okay, well, this is the threshold of my own soul. For those of us that are on consciously a soul path, that are on this journey where we're aware of ourselves as being on this evolutionary journey, of course, there's more of a skillfulness to do that. And for many souls, I think there's something to just appreciate and have compassion. Some dynamics need to play out.
Mm-hmm.
It just has to happen that way, because self-awareness is not going to come out of nowhere. Mm. And so there's an element to which things need to be very polarized, but in the larger scope, that actually induces learning and awareness. It's just a part of the journey.
Mm. Ari, do you think that there's ever, like, do you think that we're kind of here for that? Or do you think there ever is going to be a time when we don't have to necessarily learn everything through the painful experiences, through the polarization, through all these things? Or do you think it's kind of just by design, like that's what we're here to experience?
Two thoughts arise. Just like addressing the present, once we've learned a lesson, we can all agree that we don't repeat it. Like we don't repeat lessons. Right? Once something that we've learned, it's like you finish 11th grade, you don't complete it and then go back. You go on to 12th grade, right? So we can appreciate, okay, we've learned what we've learned. And well, that was hard. There was a lot of struggle. And there's more learning in front of me. So the question then becomes, am I going to have to suffer more? Mm-hmm. We can't protect ourselves from suffering as it arises. And there's this mysterious teaching that I love this question. And all I'm going to do is share something from A Course in Miracles. There's a section, the Course comes from Jesus. And he teaches that there's a lot of value in being a good learner. A good learner will learn from other people's teachings. And he emphasizes that we don't actually need to recreate the crucifixion. We can interpret the crucifixion as sort of teaching this ultimate lesson that the Son of God cannot die, not the more traditional idea of some sort of sacrifice to atone for our sin, but more so the demonstration that sin is not real, that we are eternal, that we are essentially guiltless and sinless in our very essence. It's more so about the resurrection. If we can learn that guiltlessness, if we can learn of our innocence, right? Then we eliminate the need for suffering. And so then suffering is just simply understood as the quickest path for that learning of forgiveness of our innocence that we can then see and share with others. And if we learn that, why would there be suffering? Because literally suffering is in the absence of that. Like suffering is never really of the body. Suffering is of the mind. Right? And so we don't know who we are. And so it's an underlying guilt and disconnect from our unity and from the love that we are, that is the pain. But if that is where we are, there couldn't be suffering. So it's kind of like all we can do is find out. I think the model for a long time, we're kind of going up in the yugas and in our human arc of evolution. So maybe we'll start finding more of us will get better at learning. And so we can move through these stages with less pain because we are learning to interpret wisely that everything is to help us learn who we are. And so let's focus more and more on who we are so we can learn it and struggle less. But that's all we can do is find out, I guess,
I love that you brought in this idea of innocence. We have Cassandra Joan Butler is our inner circle astrologer. And so at the full moon forecast, she brought in innocence because the Sabian symbol of the full moon was Mary and her lamb. Like, so
oh, no way.
Yeah. So she brought in this idea of innocence and that being one of the anchoring, guideposts for us throughout this period of time that we're in, especially with the eclipses and everything, is like returning to that innocence. Actually, we played that song, Return to Innocence, at the end of the at the end of the broadcast, because that what you're talking about, the guiltlessness, the sin as being an untruth, or like all of these ideas were brought in. So it's a nice synchronicity. All of you inner circle members, just hear this. There's something with this innocence and finding that within you, and a lot of self-forgiveness. Speaking of the inner circle, we are running a promotional period right now. Ari's going to be one of our teachers coming up soon. Natasha, Gemini, Brett, Kaylin, Nura, Georgia Stathis, Ray Merriman, some amazing astrologers that are going to be coming up and teaching us very soon here. So we are running our 50% off promotional period right now. You can lock in that 50% off on all the options of membership, monthly, annually, and lifetime. And so if the inner circle is something you've been considering and you want to learn from teachers like Ari all year long, like these incredible teachers, if you want to be in this kind of conversation all year long, if you could use that kind of support in a community who's having this conversation, you are so invited to the inner circle. And right now is the best time to join. And so this is going to be through the end of March that we'll be running this 50% off promotion. So go check it out, astrologyhub.com/inner circle. Again, that's astrologyhub.com/inner circle. Ari, is there anything else you want to say to us about this Mars-Pluto dance, about this period of time we're in right now?
One final thought. I just came to mind. In most non-Westernized cultures, even during times of great oppression and suffering, you've always seen song and dance. That I think of that, Mars in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius. And I think when we disconnect from our ability to kind of creatively meet the times, that's where we become more closed and defensive and protective and fearful. So I just wanted to offer that out there. Like, find our song and dance, like live it, shine, express our being, and don't be afraid to live. Even if that feels kind of antithetical to maybe some of the fears arising right now. This is just a time of great evolution.
I love that. How can I creatively meet the time? Can I creatively meet it? And it's funny. I was watching like a Western, like an old Western movie. And in this little town, there was a dance hall. And I had that thought of like, wow, there's not even that many buildings in this little town. And yet there's a dance hall.
Yeah, there we go.
And talk about dangerous times, and talk about tumultuous times, and talk about, the wild, wild west. There's all kinds of crime and all.
Don't we all know this? Like, where does our deepest art, our deepest song, our poetry, our creative qualities, they come from? I was listening to, what's that amazing person? He's a Pisces. He wrote the book, The Creative Act. You know what I'm talking about? He's a musical producer. He's worked with like every good person. Half of the people listening know who I'm talking about.
Okay.
But he said, the best art comes from people that are deeply troubled. And it really means they're in touch with with the part of their soul, the part of their life that can actually destroy them and really hurt them. That's very destructive and painful and difficult. But instead of losing their soul to it, they tend to meet it and they give it expression. So if we're really in touch with our soul path, and especially the times, we might find this impelling calling to create. And then that creation transmutes the energy and it inspires one another. We inspire each other. We help each other, like, oh my God, thank you for doing what you're doing. And we offer so much to our collective growth. But it's like the best art comes from the pain and the grist of meeting the difficulty of this evolutionary journey.
Yes. Yes. Another thing we were talking about in the inner circle is that chaos precedes creativity.
There we go.
It is like, it is, the creativity comes from this like very electric, alive, chaotic sort of energy that then we funnel in and we create from that. So I just keep thinking about that in these times. It's like, oh my God, there's so much swirling energy. It's like everywhere. It's a lot. It's intense. And how can I like take that in and create from it and use my own capacities and my gifts to create from it?
Can I say one more thing that just arose from that?
Yeah.
Many of us, especially, those on a spiritual path, might not feel very entitled to be seen or to step forward or to share our gifts. Like, why does the world need another astrologer or another massage therapist or another, right? I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And yet, just to consider, in the absence of our leadership, in the absence of our creative offering, in the absence of our heart, we have a lot of other people that are stepping into their leadership because they have no problem taking up that space. So what the world needs more of right now are our souls that maybe otherwise never felt that strength or that empowerment. And that's many of us. Many of us here right now listening, we can relate to that. Maybe we have more to offer, more to give than we've otherwise thought of ourselves. And I really want to invite that self-reflection for all of us.
Thank you. It's so good. It's so good, Ari. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your depth. I mean, this is the thing. Even when Ari's an inner circle astrologer, he often will write songs for us and play them for us. And so we get to just be serenaded by his beautiful, poetic heart that is so deep and so wise. And Ari, thank you so much. You're just a deep, deep well of beauty. I love it. I love being in your presence. Thank you for sharing that with our community. And thank you for being on that panel event. Thank you for being a part of our inner circle. Thank you for being here on the podcast. And thanks to all of you for being here, for tuning in, for being curious, for being great learners. I mean, really, I would say that this community is a community of great learners. And so this is a beautiful thing. It's an incredible time to be alive. And I'm just happy to be in the canoe with all of you. All right. So we'll catch you on the next episode. Take care, everyone. Any links that we talked about here today are going to be in the show notes. Ari, where can they find you?
arimoshe.com. And my YouTube is Heart and Soul Centered Astrology.
Fabulous. Awesome. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Catch you on the next episode.